Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar entitled Shaping Claims Experience in the Next Normal. We've all heard the term the new normal, but it's about the next normal, not returning to normal, but defining that next path forward. Brought to you today by Reuters Events Insurance in partnership with VPay. This webinar is a part of a series leading up to the Future of Insurance, the conference that's happening virtually this November from the 16th to the 18th. You can get more information about that in your registration information here or at the link you'll get after the event with the recording and more information. So stay tuned for that. Well worth signing up and attending. The content here today is fantastic. I'm excited to hear what our amazing panelists have, and that event in November, the Future of Insurance, will have even more for you. I'm Brian Falchuk. I'm your moderator today. I'm the managing partner of Insurance Evolution Partners and the author of the book, The Future of Insurance: From Disruption to Evolution. And I'm joined today by Ian Thompson, Jeff Brown, and Shannon Harger. I'll go through each of them right before they speak so you can find out who they are. But what I would encourage you to do is make sure you put your questions in the Q&A section because we will have a very rich and open panel discussion around the questions that you care about after each of the speakers talks today. So you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen in Zoom, and you can type your question in there. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our first speaker. We have first up Ian Thompson, who's the Global Chief Claims Officer for Zurich. Ian has over 25 years of experience in insurance, including 19 with RSA, before joining Zurich in 2012 as the European Chief Claims Officer, and then in 2014 becoming the Chief Claims Officer for the newly formed EMEA region, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. In 2018, he became the Group Chief Claims Officer for Zurich globally, overseeing a team of 10,000 life and P&C claims professionals across 40 countries, 5 continents, and an annual claim spend of $18 billion, which, having run a claims organization myself, that makes me shake in my boots a bit. But with that, Ian, let me turn it to you to share some thoughts today.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, everybody. Thanks to Reuters Events for inviting me to speak today. Yeah, look, COVID-19 has been a human tragedy, and its impacts socio-economic-wise and broader are still being felt. So even if we talk about the next normal, we're not quite in a normal even now. So I wanted to share some thoughts of experience that we've had at Zurich around this, and through that hopefully explore then some themes around, so what are the takeaways for us, recognizing that I think one of the things that's going to be the watchword for any leader, any claims organization, any business is ongoing agility and flexibility as we see how things develop. So I'll focus firstly on people and then talk about customers, and then interweave the technology questions in through those areas, because I think it's important that we look through those lenses when we talk about technology. So our experience at Zurich was to move people to a home work environment really rapidly. In some territories, we're able to get 90% of our people working from home within 48 hours and getting them working pretty effectively at that. And we were blessed with some good investment last year, which we didn't know this kind of thing was coming, who did? But thank God we made that investment in some good infrastructure and some good home working and collaboration tools. And that has really paid off and has allowed our people to continue to support our customers. I started with people because that was our philosophy. If we look after our people first, then we'll be able to look after our customers. And our people have really stepped up to the mark. So the change that was required for our people in that cannot be underestimated. And I'm sure it's the same in your organizations. But I think that people adaptability and flexibility that we've seen can often be somewhere between underestimated and taken for granted. And if you think about the change that we've all gone through in moving to a home working environment, in moving to the adoption of new tools, capabilities, requiring greater a sense of empowerment for our people, this kind of change, if we'd actually been sitting down and planning it out, we probably would have given ourselves, I think if we'd given ourselves 5 years, we probably would have been criticized for trying to push change too quickly. And yet we've done this in 5 months. And that says a huge amount around the importance of people, but also the power of the people we have. And what we've seen as well, which has been really interesting, is that the productivity has increased. People have shown a huge amount of flexibility. So where we've had lines of business where maybe claims volumes have been much lower, and we've had pressures in other areas, then we've seen people willing to move and help out in different teams. We've seen a marked improvement in our engagement scores as well. We completed a survey and scores are up 50% positive, but also when asked the question, how do you feel supported through COVID? Scores were 78, 80% positive. And so it's great to see that our people have risen to the challenge. But I think this is part of our challenge going forward, and I'll come back to that in a moment. I said to talk about customer. Well, the great news is our TMPS, broadly speaking, has held up. It's not been easy. We've not had consistently happy customers. But what has kept customers happier than they may have been? So I think one thing is that we've seen that customers were maybe expecting less, so we were able to deliver more. Customers have reached out to us through traditional routes, through the telephone, but they'd be much more willing to adopt new ways of interacting with us. So chatbots, portals have seen massively increased usage. But we've adapted as well, setting up WhatsApp groups around specific claims with suppliers, with customers, with other members of the claims community that are involved in sorting things out for their customer. Looking at how we engage with our broker partners and our agents, and looking at how we can support them to help our customers. And that again comes to the point, which is we don't just deliver through our technology and our people. Our supply chains, our partners that work to deliver for our customers have been absolutely critical in this. We've seen as well interesting changing customer behavior around willingness to adopt remote adjusting tools. So in one of our territories, when we were heavily pushing the use of remote assessment for auto damage, we were getting no more than 20% take up before COVID. During COVID, that rose to over 60% take up. So there was definitely a shift in behavior. Interesting thing is that that's starting to fall off again, and people are expecting somebody to come out as lockdown and controls reduce. So how do we challenge that, and how do we get that to be something that people are more willingly to consistently to accept? And look, there are processes that we all have that we take for granted, but take on a new priority. If you take payments to suppliers and to customers, usually that's the back end of the process, and the claims handler presses the authorized button and then kind of forgets about it. But in a world where cash flow is so important, people are furloughed, people don't have jobs, then knowing that that money is going to come in and come in quickly, knowing that their car that they may be relying on to look after vulnerable family members is still going to be available to them, that takes on real significance, and it changes the perception of things that maybe we took for granted before. And I mentioned suppliers, the resilience of our supply chain, the impacts that we've seen on the nature of those supply chains, crossing borders, and the challenges with that has been something, and it's shown us the importance of relationships with our suppliers. So, as I said, technology weaves all the way through that, and I've touched on that several times. So, how does this play into the next normal? I think the first thing is like everybody, we've done reviews, we've updated the continuity plans based on experience, but also we're challenging ourselves to go beyond that. And key lessons, this importance of recognizing the people perspective on what we've gone through and how we enable that. We've taken for granted that people are willing to work from home, but yet have they got the safe working environment at home that is sustainable? We've looked at it through making sure people maybe have still got paid, and we showed empathy and support for our people, but there are mental challenges and welfare challenges associated with home working that we have to think about, because we have set a new normal for our people now, and the expectations about return to office and the office being the same space it used to be have fundamentally changed. So we need to think about how the reinvention of that office space links into a more virtual working environment. Now, I don't think the office is dead. I just think the way it's going to be utilised and the way we're going to think about our space has to change. We also need to think about some nuances of that as well. So if we've not got teams based in the office, how does that informal learning of the more experienced person sitting next to the less experienced person now happen? How does that transfer of knowledge happen? That means that the ways in which people built their experience in learning by, you know, by seeing how others did it or being able to ask for help, how are we going to facilitate that? Because that's going to be a real challenge for us. And I think as well, this virtual working, and this is a theme I'll come back to in a minute, the challenge we have as well is a leadership challenge. There is a whole different bunch of skills you need from a leadership perspective when you have a team in an office and you can get up from your desk and you can go and see people in their pods or their working environment. So when you have a bunch of people in different working locations, and you know, for organizations in US, but global organizations working across time zones as well, how do you manage that? How do you make that work? And how do you support people in that? I think it requires some new skills around you know, emotional intelligence and people engagement that maybe we've taken for granted in the past. And then looking at the customer side, you know, I said maybe customers expected less but got more. They weren't expecting to be able to get through to anybody, yet they got through to us. They weren't expecting us to be able to sort their problem out, yet we did. So no one in our team is complacent about these transactional net promoter scores that we're seeing, because we know that we've now set a new expectation and we've got to now meet that expectation. We were successful in that we had a few pilots here, a few proof of concepts and developments there that we were able to ramp up and utilize for some of these things, but they weren't necessarily systemic, innovation-based drivers of change within the claims organization, because claims, just as any other part of the team, really has to fight for resource. And that resource challenge is not going to reduce, because now we've got to get into the next normal on the basis of maybe less top line they were expecting, you know, an expense ratio that is maybe not going to go the way that the stakeholders and the finance team want to see. So that challenge on expenses is going to come, and it's not going to make it any easier for us to fight and capture the capital we need. So we need to think entrepreneurially about how we can do that and leverage off the capabilities we have, but also be much more skilled around the executive table of selling the business case from every angle. I can see that the clock's run down on my section. I've got plenty more to say, but I know that others have too. So I'll finish there and look forward to hearing from my co-panelists and also for any questions that may come up. So Brian, back to you.
Yes, that's great, Ian, and I can promise you, you're not off the hook in talking about some of these points more. I caught a few things. The shoot up to 60% adoption of the digital sort of self-service, if you will, of claims, and then dropping back down. That's something I'm keenly interested in. So I think that's a topic we might be able to get into in the Q&A. As a reminder for people, you can shoot your questions in the Q&A. There was a lot in there. The leadership points. It is a different world. It's a different set of skills. Empathy is completely different in this environment about different things that maybe would have been off limits before, right? We couldn't ask about people's family life, but family and business are intertwined. And if you don't ask, are you supporting them? Because there's a whole set of other mental challenges and support needed in the new world. And then the question of coming back, and do you feel safe or not? And political divides that emerge, really interesting and difficult situation to navigate. So thank you, Ian. You also mentioned payments, which was a little while ago in what you were saying, but is a beautiful segue into hearing from Jeff Brown, who joins us as president of VPay. Jeff's focus is on sales, business, corporate development, as well as legal and regulatory affairs, which harkens back to his past as an attorney partner in a Dallas-based law firm representing businesses ranging from startup enterprises to Fortune 1000 companies. And I'm sure for those of you who have been to some of the Reuters events in person, you will recognize VPay. I'm excited to hear from Jeff, as the payments question, I think, is one we really need to figure out. As Ian said, that cash flow, it's front and center for insured. So how do we move the claim to that final step that they're so interested in? So Jeff, very excited to hear from you.
Great. Thanks so much, Brian, and really interesting information from you, Ian. Look forward to more of the Q&A. So again, thanks for the opportunity today. My goal today is to help you understand what a digital payment strategy should entail and why, and how COVID has accelerated the need for it, I guess, to put it succinctly. the punchline, not surprisingly, is that there are unquestionable customer, financial, and even infrastructure advantages around digitizing your payments, your outbound claim payments. So maybe a good place to start is a little bit of context in the landscape that we find ourselves in. Even before COVID, insurance in general was experiencing some disruption, disruption that you had seen in other industries, particularly around the way consumers acquired products or utilized products. Think about, how retail has changed because of Amazon, or how entertainment has changed because of Netflix, or transportation's changed because of Uber. There are some obvious natural barriers to entry for companies coming into insurance. And I think that delayed the disruption, but it is undoubtedly here. And I think that was clearly recognized by insurers at the beginning of 2020. Before COVID hit, we had heard from a number of insurance companies that at the top of their IT priorities was innovation and growth. Now, as COVID impacted businesses across the country in late first quarter of this year, those priorities, the technology priorities, shifted to a degree to greater focus on things like cost reduction. Customer retention obviously was key, and process optimization. Now, while those technology priorities shifted because of COVID, the need to digitally transform the payment process did not. It was always there. It's just been accelerated by COVID. I think it's natural for all businesses, not just insurance companies, but all businesses, when you see a market downturn like we've seen, or the wild swings that we're seeing, rising unemployment, there's a tendency for all businesses to buckle down and refocus on, protecting the customers that they have today and figure out ways to minimize expenses. And as essential businesses, insurance leaders, you all have had to determine how to ensure continuity, as Ian was talking about, while keeping your employees safe, which meant work from home for most insurance companies. And what I'm hearing, and I think it's the case for most of you out there, is work from home is the plan for certainly the balance of 2020. And who knows how late into 2021 and beyond. And again, as Ian touched on, who knows whether there's some permanent changes around, work from home capabilities going forward indefinitely into the future. And in this new normal, I guess, that we're all calling it, we're hearing a lot of the things that Ian touched on. I'm hearing at VPay, insurance companies seeking ways to adjust claims remotely, moving faster on digital transformation, rethinking their workforce in light of social distancing, realigning cost structures, and really refocusing on what non-strategic activities might they be able to outsource and still accomplish the goals that they have. And those with digital claim processes found themselves at a distinct advantage when COVID hit, while those that were operating in person and with paper scrambled, right, in the last few months. And as this all relates to digital payments, digital payments offerings are central to meeting your policyholders' needs and optimizing their experience in this new normal. They want rapid access to funds, particularly during times of crisis or disasters, which could be simply the pandemic. It could be things such as hurricanes, floods, wildfires, disasters that are taking place now and that are guaranteed to take place in the future. And paying claims is not a strategic function in and of itself. I mean, all insurers, every one of you out there, have a claims payment department, right? But while not a strategic function, you cannot ignore this last piece of the claims process, because it's this payment experience that typically is the last experience that your policyholder will have on their claim. So digitally transforming various aspects of the claim process, but ending with a paper check in the mail, leaves your policyholder wanting more, particularly in today's environment where policyholders may be reluctant to receive mail for any reason. So that takes me back to what do consumers want? And again, I'll emphasize, these wants were there before COVID. They've just been accelerated because COVID. the need to meet them. You know, consumers of insurance are shifting to a younger audience. We all know that, who are used to living in a digital world. If you're as old as I am, then you remember the days of rotary phones, landlines, you know, everyone paying cash or check at the grocery store. You know, those days are long gone. You know, money is moving faster and in more ways than ever before. In younger generations, those that will be consuming your insurance pricing will be your policyholders. Interact through mobile devices that are connected to everything. This is the way that they want to interact in the future with all businesses. For these reasons, you know, when I talk to insurance companies, what I emphasize is that as it relates to digital payments, insurance companies need to focus on convenience and optionality. You need to think about web-enabled solutions that allow your policyholders to quickly approve payments and have a choice of a variety of electronic payments to receive their dollars. You know, so most of you, I'm guessing, have ACH capabilities to pay claim payments, but that is not enough in and of itself. In your everyday life, I'm sure that you use various forms of electronic payments beyond ACH, whether it's Zelle or perhaps push to debit. Maybe you're using mobile wallets like Apple Pay or Google or Venmo. The reality is that these new forms of electronic payment move money much quicker in a matter of minutes compared to traditional forms of paying, which would be paper checks or even ACH, which is going to move the next banking day, usually at its earliest, and will still have holds on funds. These new forms of electronic payments will have instantaneous transmission and no holds on funds, so that your policyholders will have immediate access to the dollars that they need. The other thing I'd emphasize is a personalized experience. This would include giving your policyholders a variety of options depending on the type of claim that they may have. If it's a disaster, they may need money immediately to go get a hotel room or to buy necessities. If it's a total loss on their car, it may be a different type of payment that they want. And other things that you can do. My guess is that a number of you may have policyholders that pay premium dollars using a debit or a credit card. You can capture that information and reuse that same information to route your policyholder money back in the event of a claim. So these are types of personal experiences that we emphasize need to be leveraged, and ones that your policyholders are going to come to expect in the near term. So what's the advantages of doing all of this, of meeting these needs and wants? So the reality is faster payments have a direct impact on customer retention and loyalty. You know, nearly 60% of the claims today are still paid by paper check that take 4 days or longer to receive. We recently did a policyholder survey, and this was just right before COVID hit. But the information we got from them was interesting. So 69% of the policyholders that we surveyed said it was important to receive a claim payment on the day that it was approved. Another 69% said it was important to receive payments instantly with no holds on funds or deposits. And 88% said a claim payment process played a role in overall satisfaction with the claim experience. Now, if you adjusted this data that we got for generations, 90% of the Gen Z respondents and 68% of the millennials said they were willing to switch insurers to gain access to instant claim payments. This is a very important part, and it's a very important part of any digital strategy as you look toward the future. You know, I think Ian touched on net promoter scores. You know, we were looking at a McKinsey survey recently that talked about digital claims experiences coupled with the right customer service offerings. And this McKinsey report said that those things can have a direct impact on retention and boost net promoter scores by 10 to 15%. The reality is that policyholders want convenience, they want options, and they really want speed. Now, while the customer advantages of adopting a digital payment strategy are key, there are certainly other advantages. I mentioned financial advantages. For years, insurers have treated payments simply, many insurers, not all, but many have treated payments simply as printing checks and account reconciliation on the back end. Maybe they had to deal with some check fraud and escheatment issues. In fact, I hear from a number of insurers that still talk about having to send essential workers into the office to manually process claim payments in the form of paper checks. If you were to digitize your payments, what you'll realize is that you will quickly reduce costs associated with print, mail, and postage. Those are obvious. But the other savings that you'll see will relate to reduced calls to your support center due to self-service capabilities, allowing your policyholders to manage their mobile payment options via the user interfaces I talked about earlier, reducing your employee time to handle administrative tasks. If the checks go away, so does check fraud, so does escheatment, so does a number of the reconciliation issues that arise with paper-based payments. And another real important thing that you'll realize is moving to digital payments will reduce claims leakage or lost costs. That is, the sooner a payment can be made and settled by your policyholder or a claimant, the fewer days a car may sit on a lot or in storage, or the fewer days a rental car may be needed. So there are real savings that can be captured there through digitizing payments in the forms of reduced claims leakage or lost costs. Another advantage that you'll see flow through digitizing your payments will be it helps position your infrastructure to capitalize on the latest payment technologies. Insurance companies need agile, adaptable platforms that don't require system rewrites and heavy technology investments when they can. Now, when it comes to digitizing payments, many insurers out there are faced with antiquated infrastructure. So how do you get to this agile, adaptable environment when you're operating on a legacy or antiquated infrastructure? What we see is that many insurers, instead of modifying their systems in order to provide these new digital capabilities, they look to their banking partners or fintech partners where they can outsource the claim payment process. Again, it being non-strategic, a lot of the value that you can get out of digitizing payments can be captured through partnerships or outsourcing. And this movement has been accelerated due to the pandemic. If it can be effectively outsourced and the advantages realized with minimum IT lift, this gets you to the immediate return on investment that insurance companies are looking at when they look at digitizing various aspects of the claim process. And these infrastructure advantages would include, as you digitize, reducing the need for manual employee engagement that I touched on earlier, outsourcing some of the compliance burden that you deal with. And as you look at payments, the compliance burden is going to become more onerous. As money moves quicker, more banking regulations are going to be implicated, whether it's the Bank Secrecy Act or OFAC or Know Your Customer or PCI certifications or NACHA standards. All of these become a part of the payment structure and something that you need to be prepared to handle if you're going to handle digital payments in-house or can be outsourced to your partner effectively. The other thing is you'll find with outsourcing payments is a lot of the partners out there that you may look at have already integrated their solutions with existing core claim systems. And they have APIs available, so their platforms can be easily integrated into your mobile applications or your existing web portals, places that you may be driving your policyholders and claimants already today. So as I kind of wrap this up and we move on to the next topic and the Q&A ultimately, I'll end with this. When you're developing a strategy to digitize the claim process, you have to consider payments. And when you think about digitizing payments, you need to think about some pretty simple things. What do customers want? What are their experiences with other businesses? Because that's what they're going to expect from you. Is what you're building easy to use, and is it intuitive? And is it something that you'd like to use yourself? The need to address these evolving policyholder customer wants is not slowing down. In fact, COVID has, I think, accelerated them. and faster payments equals happier policyholders. So if you implement a thoughtful digital payment strategy, there will be guaranteed customer advantages, but there will also be financial and infrastructure advantages that will follow.
Yeah, great points, Jeff. And I think you're describing a world where customer expectations are what we're trying to meet. And you see that playing out in dramatically better NPS scores, which leads to better retention, referral rates, all that good stuff. I think we're at this point where the expectations set by every other business that they work with or every other part of their life is moving expectation to demand. So for me, the time is compressing where you could still delight customers by doing this. And very soon it'll be at a place where, as you mentioned, for a good chunk of those millennials, was it 60 something percent or whatever, would actually change carriers because you didn't do this. And you think about leakage. Yeah, the car gets out of the shop sooner and fewer rental car days. What about the arguments? What about fighting on the claim? And the sooner people have a fair settlement in their hands, the lower that pushback, the lower that arguing, the lower the chance that an attorney is brought in to go back and forth on it. It just starts to snowball. So it's an easy thing to do to delight customers. And we still have a window where we can do that before it becomes table stakes, which it may already be because of the situation we're in. So absolutely great points. And I wish it was as simple as just having people come in to print and mail checks. You also have to think about the dual signatories that you need on many of those checks. So now you've got multiple. I have a carrier who's spending 3 days in their process because they can't have the folks in the space in the same time.
Right.
So yeah, excellent points and very, very timely. Shannon Harger is next. Shannon is the Vice President of Personal Lines at Founders Insurance, where she's known for revitalizing the claims operation. Her career in insurance began in 1997 at State Farm, where she spent nearly 17 years before joining Nationwide and then Ally, and finally joining Founders in 2018, where she's an officer and a board member as well. Shannon, very excited to hear your views. Again, bring us back to the carrier perspective here.
Absolutely. So for the next few minutes, I'd like to share some insight into claims transformation and reshaping the customer and employee experience from a slightly different view than you might be used to. What I'm sharing with you comes from my many years of experience at large insurance carriers and smaller ones, but coupled with studying strategic work design and organizational development. I want you to think for a second how often you come across a problem or think about changing something and within seconds you have an answer. Or you might pick up the phone and call a vendor or an internal business unit to work on a solution. I am going to propose a different strategy to use to get better and more sustainable results. I'm sure you all have heard about Six Sigma, Lean Six Sigma, Agile, 5 Whys, Fishbone, affinity mapping, the list can go on and on and on. Those are very exceptional, fine ways to solve problems, but you don't need that deep of an education or specialization to know how to solve problems in a holistic, strategic way. We all know the very beginning of any change initiative, especially when you are attempting to capitalize on a competitive edge, must begin with constructing problem statements that clearly articulate the gaps you need to solve for. And this is so important right now in the time of quick innovation and quick adoption ratings. You know, you want those numbers quickly and you want to move forward in the market. Well, you have to think about the gap. Meaning, comparing and contrasting your current state and system capabilities against your desired result. And then you solve for the difference, which is your gap. This is the key to saving time on unnecessary improvements that do not tie back to your goals or desired changes. And how many times have we seen change initiatives come through with good intent? However, they aren't necessarily tied back to the goals or help us sustain a good change long term. What I'm proposing also saves money, and it will allow you to learn more about your organization's work design and capability far beyond what happens when transformation projects end. But first, I want to talk about some elephants in the room. Some of the challenges we face is the reluctance to rethink or challenge our practices and processes, because we may believe that claims transformation is a plug and play, or that we already know what our needs are even before we get started. So our mindsets are very outdated, and we have blind spots because as leaders, we all solve problems all day long because that's what we do. Sometimes it's politics and bias that impede our ability to solve our own problems. We don't want to be that person that change happens to. We want to put the change movement on others, or we don't want to upset what we feel is working good for us. Other times we're attached to very irrelevant information, causing our perceptions to be completely out of line with the true problem and the gap that exists. Or we hear what our competitors are doing and get distracted by a very, very good opportunity. And then we just move so quickly that we miss really what our intent is for solving that issue. MIT Sloan Management has published an article in partnership with Cognizant. It's called The New Leadership Playbook for the Digital Age. What they speak to is creative problem solving, changing your mindset to look at work across multiple functions of your organization, being inclusive with the creation and implementation of change and practices to get results that focus on systems in place. So part of this is shifting from what our unconscious reactions, those gut feelings that we get sometimes that makes us make decisions sometimes that aren't necessarily focusing in on the true intent of what we need to change to fill that gap. And so that is where we need to really slow down and harness our collective strengths and gain a competitive edge by slowing down and thinking with our more conscious side of our brain when we're going through trying to solve our problems. So let's start with the financial side of finding efficiency gains. Before you call an outside vendor or call in the process management team, I want you to stop and think, what is the problem you're trying to solve? So did you go to the solution already? You need to back it up, because we need to think deeply about the problem without associate assignment of blame or allowing yourself to jump to the solution. Think about the problem. And I'm going to give you an example that I was faced with a few years ago. I came in with an existing claim system that was relatively new. It was only about 10 years old. It was a homegrown system, but we needed to get it to automate some functions for our claims team so that we were more efficient and accurately handling claims according to our best practices. I didn't have a very big budget. I couldn't go out and buy a new claim system, and I needed to work within the structure I was given. So what did I do? I figured out what the missing link was, what that gap was between what we had now and what we needed to do to get it to do what we wanted it to. And I tied all of that back to what the activities and intent are of the activities that we take as claim handlers, and backing that back up into what the customer really needs and wants out of the claim resolution process. I really didn't need anybody to tell me about that. I figured it out by figuring out that gap. From that small change initiative that we undertook, then I was able to look at our use of technology with our material damage appraiser vendor. Now I could easily show the gap between what we were doing and what we were capable of doing and get the engagement that I needed, because I had that really great win on the other side. And the project cost times were significantly less because we took the first project and built upon it. We used mini cycles that catapulted projects that could have easily taken a year in less than 3 months. And I minimized the disruption to our legacy system by not overloading it with too many changes at once. And I was able to capitalize on those technological advances through our vendor, which really helped us out. And you want to talk about adoption rate with Quick Estimate and things like that that are out there today. You know, I'm proud our team was an early riser in that group, and we definitely have capitalized on that technology. But it all involves creative problem solving, seeing what your current state is and determining what the gap is, so that you can look at what your goals are and allows you to execute on that plan, track results, and learn what you're capable of and what we need outside help with. Then you can have those good, deep conversations with your vendors who then know how to help you. And at the end, you're not left with, I got this great product. It can do all these wonderful things, but it's not filling the gap that I really wanted it to fill. Also, you know, you're going to be within your project budget. And I can tell you're going to get a huge lift from your people. From what I did, it resulted in lower cycle times for our claims. Our pending dropped substantially. Our severity was much more in line where it should be. But our customer service changed because our people's attitudes changed, which directly goes right back to the customer. So now you see how I tied back the financial piece of claims transformation with employee morale. I was able to improve several key goals with just a few strategically placed changes, but it gets better. It's extremely important to ensure your claims teams not just understand the whys. I mean, we hear that all the time underneath the guise of change management. Claims professionals, we are trained investigators. We will figure out the reason behind change, whether it is explicit or not, but then the narrative is not controlled. And well, let's just say, I think we all have seen how poorly changes when you don't have control over the narrative, how that ends up. It is best if we, the leaders bringing forth change, share the problem, the gaps, and the difference between current and future state. It shouldn't be a hidden secret. It needs to be very transparent. And we need to steer clear of assignment of blame and bias and stick to the data and systems processes and just not towards the human actions. By setting truly clear, easy to understand goals for everyone, full transparency, that is how we create buy-in. And progress will happen because we link the activity of the claims handling to the intent of the change at the level it can be understood. So how does that translate into customer retention? Associates will know how to set clear expectations with the customers, to what Jeff just spoke about. When your employees understand the great benefits it brings to say, hey, I can get you the check right now, or I can get you the money this way. Wow, that's a positive motivator, not only for the customer to settle their claim, but your employees, they feel in control, they feel empowered to give options to a customer, but they also know that claim is moving across their desk much more quickly, and the customer will be happier in the very end. But finally, I want to talk about change fatigue. I think a lot of us are struggling with that piece right now. I know I do. Change fatigue is happening because there is a lot going on. To what everyone spoke about. It's happening not only at the office, but also here in our homes. You're invited, the world's invited into our homes when we do these types of things. This is my home office. It's a lot of change to go through. But by implementing stronger strategies on solving the gaps and making sure that we're targeting changes that require the least amount of organizational change within the next 30 to 60-day cycles, that is how we will build sustainable change without having change fatigue. Because no short-term solution should exist unless it has a positive long-term effect. And you can stop change fatigue by making sure when reshaping the claims experience that you aren't pushing work onto other groups. Solve issues holistically, meaning the reshaping of the claims experience involves underwriting, actuary, pricing, sales, marketing, compliance, everyone, because we all impact one another. But if we're not all rowing in the same direction, we just sit there and spin, or we sink. And that is not the intent of any change initiative. Cross-functional solutions are sustainable. Silo solutions are just not. So for example, when you cut expenses in one area to justify a savings, it will hurt you in the end somewhere in the pipeline if the holistic problem is not solved. We see that time and time again. You see where the pendulum swings and all of a sudden we're back to spending money when if we would have looked at it holistically, more strategically, we would have come out a lot better in the end. So again, this has to become a natural collaboration within an organization. Otherwise, we begin to waste money, time, and cause frustration to our employees and customers. And by staying clear of the planning fallacy, so where you overestimate benefits or underestimate costs, which is risky, but it happens way too often, your teams will feel heard, appreciated, and most importantly, engaged. So the next time you look at reshaping a process or system, you may not get the eye rolls and fear that comes with the endless reorganizations and way overpriced hype change initiatives that could have been solved by simply focusing on the smaller problems that build upon one another. And as always, our successes are built off the power of the vision that we share and the stories that we share to help our people join that journey. So we can change the narrative on reshaping the claims experience by starting with creative problem solving and strong strategic claim operating models that incorporate innovation to fill the gaps. So again, a little bit different spin, but this is from obviously the leadership perspective of the change initiatives. And I think it's timely with all of the efforts we've all put forward, and we're all seeing that end of year coming up and feeling a little bit of exhaustion. And I think that it's time for us to kind of refocus.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, Shannon. And it comes full circle with some of the points that Ian made and some of the things I wanted to dig into as we get into the Q&A, which, subtle reminder, if you have questions, put them right in the Q&A. There's a little Q&A button here in Zoom that you can use. Shannon, you mentioned employee engagement and bringing them into that process, being mindful of that burnout, because of course that works against employee engagement, while also giving them the tools so that their work is more enjoyable and less process grueling, kind of wear you down, which is not what anybody signed up for. I keep saying this, like, we didn't sign up to get stuck in processes that customers don't like and exhaust us and don't use our brains. We signed up for this work to put people's lives back together at, the worst moments that they face. And Jeff, payments, the bane of my team's existence, and we were desperately trying to digitize because we'd done all the hard work, and now we're just trying to give the insured their money, and now it's a month later and we're still chasing things down. This is not what anybody should be spending their time on. Ian, you made a point that I think was really interesting, and I want to start off with a question tied to this. You said employee engagement was up during this period, which is really interesting because this is a struggle I hear so many talk about. Is now we're all dispersed. Now we're not, you talked about the difficulty in not having that sort of apprenticeship learning that we get. We've all invested in these open floor plans so everyone can learn from each other and collaborate, and now they're dispersed. So we don't have the employee direct engagement. We don't have the team meetings in person. We don't have the lunches to celebrate something or whatever it may be. How do you drive employee engagement? And kudos if it's up right now with your team at Zurich. I'd love to hear across the board, how do we get employee engagement to an acceptable level when we're all separated and living with a bit of fear and trepidation, maybe about our jobs, about our welfare, about our kids barging in the middle of a meeting or what have you, and keep it there going forward, whatever the next normal looks like. So, and back to you to start, because you've had some success there. Oh, we can't hear you. You're not muted, but maybe Shannon, maybe we'll start with you. Ian, maybe he can get his audio sorted.
Sure. So employee engagement, I think it's definitely, we've struggled, we've done better. We've had to learn, how to engage one another differently. You started off talking about the empathy piece and how, sometimes it's taboo to, ask questions or even, show that willingness to listen and understand and appreciate where somebody's coming from. And I think that we've come a long way with that. As organizations and as a culture, that we're more comfortable now doing it because we're all going through this together. I really hope that does not change. But from an engagement standpoint and looking at our teams, it's utilizing video like this to really see one another so we can read each other's emotions and on our faces and hear, just putting it all together. But also it's sharing, that we're all in this together, and whatever we can do, whether it's flex schedules or offering, different types of assistance, that's something that we've definitely done. And, I've even gone back to writing notes and sending them through the mail because people are actually excited to see that they get something in the mail, with just a simple handwritten note of, hey, thanks for doing this, or I'm just thinking about you. It does go a long way.
Human, right? Ian, should we see if your audio is working now?
Let's see what the audio is working now.
You.
All right, good. Look, the feedback from the people has been really humbling, because I guess what we tried to do is two things. Is one is take away some of that fear and uncertainty. So by going out really early on and saying we're going to get through this, not by making people redundant and putting big restructures through. That's not what we're about. We're going to make sure that we protect people and we look after them. It removes a huge pressure in a world where everything's been thrown upside down and you don't know where your certainty is coming from anymore. But you've got to live by that as well. You can't just say it. So I think the second thing is look, I can only talk for myself, and my schedule has changed massively from lots of committees and project steering groups and things like this to basically communication. In a vacuum, people kind of create their own myths and legends around what's going on. And you have to therefore help people by saying sometimes, look, I don't know what's going on, but I can tell you this, or I'll go and find out. So we've done this on one-to-ones. I've done it with my direct reports. I've done it with my entire team. I've done it with my global team across 2 different, times to capture all the time zones. We record stuff so people have got childcare. They can watch the communication later. And at least 50% of my schedule now is just communication with different groups, keeping things together and collaborating across different teams as well. And I think that people have really felt that they're being looked after, and they felt a sense of community. And I think that's really important as well, because, you know, in this environment, we've seen it in streets and you know, around, you know, places of worship, the communities that come together. But if you don't feel a sense of community at work, then you've got a real challenge about the organization you're working for.
Yeah. Jeff, I might spin the question a little bit differently that touches on a couple of the questions coming out in the Q&A around how do you find out what people need? How do you find out, you know, whether it's about a payment solution that customers want? Because, you know, Shannon said we may have the answer ourselves, or we believe we do. It may not be the answer to what any of our customers need. So the question that's been coming up is whether it's about employee sentiment, their needs, their desires, customer sentiment, their expectations, their demands. How do we find out what the answers to those things are so we can start to make changes?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a variety of ways we do it, but I'll start with one of the last things I said, which is think about what you want, right? Think about what, if you were the customer, if you were the policyholder and your house was burned down, do you want to check mail to you somewhere? That's not the experience that you want. So that's always an easy place to start to think about the customer's wants and needs. But yeah, I think that there is some value in surveys. You can't put too much emphasis on those things, but I think it's an aggregation of resources. Talking to our clients, the insurance companies, the carriers, what they're hearing is an important aspect for us as we think about extensions or expansions of the technology that we make available to our clients, the carriers. But it's a lot of it is really just common sense. Look out there and see what effective solutions are being utilized in other industries. And you're going to see that those things, if they're effective, they will find their way into all industries. I mentioned the Amazon experience, right? And it doesn't seem like it's analogous to insurance, but think about how frictionless that whole experience is. And it's really been highlighted by the COVID, the pandemic, right? I mean, how many people didn't think that they were going to buy groceries online, and how many people today are buying groceries online because Amazon and others have created this frictionless experience. I believe that's doable in insurance, and not just around the payment process, but all parts of the claims experience, from the first notice of loss through the adjudication process, creating transparency, ease of use, and again, leveraging mobile interfaces when you can, because that's how we, and particularly the younger generations, are going to want and consume information and interact with, not just among their peers, but with businesses.
Yeah. Shannon, how about yourself? Where are you pulling the insights of not answering the question yourself, but finding out what the people really want, whether it's your own people or the customers?
You know, it's really important that you talk to every single person that's in your organization, from, you know, the admin all the way, you know, past me to, you know, the chairman of the board. It's, you know, everyone has different perspectives on what the problem is. And sometimes we do really, from our vantage point, think that we know the answer. It's very surprising when you sit back and allow people a very safe space to share their thoughts. You know, some of the great things they bring up that you realize, wow, there's the, you know, that's the ticket right there. So we do, you know, have a lot of different ways of our folks to get feedback to us. You know, especially before we do change initiatives, I have a lot of my team do the UAT because we want to make sure that it's just not ready from the IT side or the process side. It's real life that we can work with. And we have found that, you know, the feedback we get through that is just instrumental in us being able to deploy changes without the hiccups that we typically would see. Now, granted, I'm at a smaller carrier. I have a lot of control over that. Larger carriers, sometimes, I wouldn't be in that position where I'd have control over that. But that's been something that's been a great learning opportunity for me within my position. But also, I work for a company. We're very open. We talk a lot. We're claims people. We all talk a lot. But it's one of those things, though, that we get involved in emotions because we're in claims. So we tend to share a lot. Our filters sometimes are not as complete as maybe other business units. You all know that now. But it's definitely one of those things that allows us to be more open to change, and also for myself to hear others say things and say, wow, where did that come from, and where am I missing it? Yeah. It takes that level of, I can back off and allow others to come forward and bring their ideas forward. It doesn't always need to be from me.
Yeah. And how about yourself? And especially, as Shannon was saying, the size difference and the breadth of lines of business and types of customers and complexities, and from the personal lines all the way through to really complex specialty lines and life products. How do you get that view and know how to focus in?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that we really emphasize is whilst I sit in a group function, I mean, nobody handles a claim sitting in the office where I am today. It's all done at the coalface, which is local. So you have to respect that. So it's no good coming out with a strategy centrally that hasn't got, skin in the game from the local teams. One of the things we're pushing at the moment is a claims customer excellence program, which is global in its concept, but local in its delivery. And we're using design thinking in that process. So we've been looking a completely different way. And, back to the virtual working, I mean, this team now has got 45 members and a core team from across claims, but also other stakeholder groups, including underwriting, and across time zones. And the virtual working is just fantastic. But how are we doing that? So we're using customer insight as part of the design thinking work to actually drive a really different way of thinking about what it is that we need to deliver. Shannon's hit the nail on the head. We rush to solutions far too quickly. And I think maybe if one of the things, the takeaways is that, as leaders, we tend to kind of look at patterns that we recognize from the past to present to current issues that we're facing. Nobody's faced what we just faced over the last 6 months, and we're still experiencing. So it should have given us a slap around the face to say, stop looking for patterns, look again and say, this is something new. Where do I get new input from to understand something new and different about what we're facing into here?
Yeah. Other questions that are meaty and worth getting into, and we don't signing up for the Future of Insurance conference in this journey, and maybe we'll have some more clarity about when that next phase of the next normal will hit us, or maybe we won't, but either way, we'll be further along that journey. Jeff, Shannon, Ian, thank you, all three of you, so much for joining and sharing some thoughts. I think we could have gone another couple of hours, and fantastic questions from the attendees. I'm sorry we couldn't get into even more of them. I was trying to mishmash as many of them together so we could hit on some of the key points. And thank you to Insurance Nexus of Reuters Events for putting this together, and for VPay to helping to support that. So thank you, everyone. Remember, the Future of Insurance, November 16th to 18th, and enjoy the rest of your days.